This is just an 8-leg daily video. I was asked by one viewer to get rid of my stickers on the truck and show the gear vendors. So I can accommodate you on one of two of your requests. I'm under here showing the gear vendor. It is a 69 F250. Has a C6, and it had the shorty C6 tail shaft. I installed the gear vendor unit in the truck with the transmission in the truck. It was a little bit more challenging having the transmission horizontal like this instead of vertical, because you have a parking brake pawl and a little parking brake disc, and it keeps wanting to fall out when it's vertical. So I solved that problem by putting a little bit of assembly goo on it to stick it on. But let me just start off by saying this is the shorty tail section C6 gear vendor unit. You can see the actual gear vendor unit there going into their 1360 splined yoke. It's pretty tight under here, tighter than what I thought. And that gear vendor tail section is what comes with it. It's a little bit more intricate than the standard gear vendor unit, being that this was the shorty tail section C6 that they used in a lot of F-Series trucks. Now, they might have used it in cars. I did some research on there, and I seen that they have 3 different lengths. They have a 7-inch, like a 14, and then like a 16, 20-inch, something like that. This was definitely the 7-inch tail shaft. So this unit came with that replacement tail shaft that used to have the bolted on yoke with the bearing in it, and then it bolted into another adapter there. Focus in there. It bolted into that small adapter right there. That's where your bearing is, the replacement bearing inside there, and then the gear vendor unit itself bolts onto the back. And being that I lowered my truck, I was able to actually have a one-piece driveline. Let me see if I can get that shot. And from what I remember, it was like 58 and 7/8 inches long. It's a 3-inch tube. And I replaced to the bigger yoke in the back, since they had the bigger yoke in the front. 1360. That's a Dana 60 rear end. There's the activator. It's a solenoid. It goes to the electronics inside the cab of the truck. You basically have your speedometer on the left side for this truck. It goes into a speed sensor, and then it connects to my existing speedometer cable. And the speed sensor in auto mode is what senses when the gear vendor turns on and turns off. I believe it's 45 to 50 miles an hour. It's usually around 45, 46. And it'll automatically shift into overdrive if you have it in auto mode. There's 2 different switches up there in the cab. You have auto mode, and you can turn it off with manual mode and shift it by the floor switch automatically whenever you want it to come in. Now, for all those transmission guys, I was seeking so much help when I put this on. Gear vendors assured me that it can be done because they used to do a lot of these installs at their shop. They said this is a rare gear vendor. They don't sell this one that much. It is the shorty kit for a C6 or a C4. So you have to disassemble the rear of your transmission. Where that gear vendor rear section is, that used to be the existing C6 gear section with the bearing bolted onto the back. And you pull the entire output shaft just straight out. You don't want to turn it. You don't want to do anything. You want to just pull it as straight out as you can, because the gear vendor supplies a brand new output shaft. When I was asking a lot of questions of whether or not you could pull the output shaft out of a C6 with the truck, the transmission still in the truck, a lot of people said no, because that's the very last thing, or the very first thing that you put in. But the shorty tail section is different. It's way different. So I have done it. So if anybody's watching this video and they ever wanted to know, on the shorty tail section C6, if you can remove the tail section and pull this shaft out, you can, because I did it. And I know very little about transmissions, okay? I'm just a novice backyard mechanic guy. So it was a little challenging. It took a lot of encouragement to want to take this job on, but I had a lot of support from gear vendors, technical support. And it was a little tricky getting the shaft back in, because if you actually turn the splines, they won't line up, and you got to like try to find all the splines in the clutches to get the shaft to go all the way in. But it was a success. I've had it in since 2022. I actually wrote the date when I did all the work, so it's been in here for 3 years. That's the sump it has. That's where the oil goes. Of course, it's got the filler plug. Anyway, that's just general stuff. From what I understand, the actual gear vendor units are all the same. It's the actual adapter that's different. And I do know that this is one of the hardest gear vendors to install. If it's out of the truck, it's the easiest thing in the world. But in the truck, it was a challenge. And if anybody has an F-Series truck with that big old, not only this cross member, but that big, huge one in the front, you know how troublesome it is to pull this transmission out. And I've actually had the transmission rebuilt before I did all this, and I wasn't pulling that transmission back out. So I was going to do it on my own. And I did it, thanks to a lot of help from gear vendors and support, but I could not get any answers from even transmission builders. They couldn't remember, or they don't know, because they don't do it very often. They said, I don't think you could do that. I don't think you can pull that tail shaft out. No, on the shorty C6, the output shaft will just pull right out. So it mounted up pretty much in the stock locations. Really not much more I could show you down here, other than the gear vendor is an awesome unit, and it was worth every penny that I spent on this thing. I know that they are expensive. This one is more expensive because you're also buying the output shaft. It has a specific output shaft for this transmission. Now the regular C6 is pretty straightforward. It has a long tail shaft that comes out the back, and you just simply replace your C6 cover in the rear, and you just put a coupler and bolt it on and go. But with this one, you see where the gear vendor, where the yoke is coming out, these are my holes where I had my carrier bearing right there. So I would have had a little short 12-inch drive line going to that. So that's why I decided to go with the one-piece drive line. And so far, no problems with it. I love this thing. It's so much more fun to drive. Okay, so basically it has a MSD controller. These are the two wires that come off the controller that shift the gear bender in and out. You have the speed sensor that tells it when to shift in auto mode. And let me go up in the cab and show you the electronics. Now basically there's about 4 wires that come out of the firewall. That's it. And I ran them to my parking brake, as you can see, because that was the hole in the floor, and I didn't want to drill another hole, so I just followed it, zipped it, and went right up where followed the parking brake cable. Came up out of the parking brake, went up and over everything. There's the MSD controller unit. I mounted it right where the little cutout was for the factory clutch thing that I don't have. It's pretty simple and straightforward. If I can do it, You can do it. Anybody can do it. If I can do it. It's all plug and play. I routed them pretty clean, I guess you can say. So basically they want, you know, one wire to keyed ignition, and you have the floor switch right here. I put it in this spot because they said to put it here because it's where your memory is, so that's dimmer. There was no holes drilled in here. I just put it right here for better. So anyway, let me get up in here. I went a little custom on this. I have my AFR gauge right there, and you have two indicator lights for the gear bender. One, red, is off. You are not in overdrive. Green is on when you are in overdrive. And they also have a switch that you can turn the gear bender off. Mine right now is in the on position. If I turn this off, it would only shift in manual mode, which is the button on the floor. If you turn it to on, it's going to be activated and it will automatically shift into overdrive in any gear now. Sometimes when we think about an overdrive in a gear bender, it's first, second, third, and overdrive. When you're in auto mode, the only thing the gear bender knows is 45 miles an hour. So if you really want to be a guru of gear benders and be an apprentice of theirs, I got this B&M shifter right here. And if you drop this thing into first in auto mode, it will automatically shift from first to first over. Then, as you're shifting this baby into second, you're going to hit this button on the floor to turn the gear bender off, and now you're in second direct as you bang this sucker into second. Then you go back here, push this button again, now you're in second overdrive. Then you pop this baby into third, push this button down, now you're in third direct. And then when you're already probably at 100 miles an hour, you push this button down again, now you're in third overdrive. That's 6 gears. I've been playing around with that. I'm not that good at it, but I had some success the other day, and I was like, if you could master that, you could be tearing up the streets with this thing. So it's not just a first, second, third overdrive, let's go to the mountains. This thing could really kick some butt if you know how to do it. And it'll make a smaller motor really make some torque and horsepower. And what I mean by that is, like, say for example, this truck has a 373 Dana 60 rear end. I hated driving this truck on the freeway. I would be at 3,000 RPM at 60 miles an hour was 3,000 RPM. Being that your transmission is spinning at such a lower speed, like say 65, 70 miles an hour, where it used to be spinning at 3,000 RPM. If you push this pedal all the way down to the floor in a passing gear mode, your kickdown will disactivate the gear bender and it'll drop you into third. So it is a fully functional 4-speed transmission. And you will get power like you never thought of on the freeway. Even if you had a 2-barrel carburetor with a small block, or even this 390 that originally had a 2-barrel in it. It will blow your mind how much power you will pick up from dropping out of gear bender into third gear at 70 miles an hour. A direct 3-speed won't do that, because when you're 65, 70 miles an hour, your transmission is spinning too fast for it to kick down to second, so it won't do anything. You'll floor the pedal and you'll just get the power from the carburetor. But this one, you will get the power and torque from the transmission. That's what's so awesome about it too. Okay. You turn the ignition key on. Okay, now it's in auto mode. You see the button's up. The red light is telling me that the gear bender is not activated and it's fully functioning. Okay, like I was saying, if you want to just shift it in manual mode, you will go over here and turn this off, which the light went off, right? Because now it will only go on when you push the button on the floor. So you basically just bypassed the auto mode by flipping that switch. So now you're driving down the road, you get to 55 or 55, 60, whatever you want. You push the button on and then it'll go to green and the gear vendor will be on. Of course, now it's not going to go to green because the gear vendor is not on. Okay. A lot of tricks to it, but that's the basic functions. That is the basic functions of the gear vendor. Sometimes I like to drive around in just manual mode only. A lot of times I just leave it in overdrive and just let it kick into overdrive going 45 miles an hour and just act like a force at it. I wish I would have did a tutorial video when I did install the gear vendor, but it was a big thing. It's probably one of the biggest things I ever done to the truck myself. And like I said, I don't know very little about transmissions, and I was able to do it. So if I can do it, you can do it. Yes, they are expensive, but it was worth every penny, not only in the gas savings, but just in the fun, overall fun of the truck. I did a few gas mileage tests. I have a bigger carburetor now, but when I had the 600 Holly on it, it's a big block 390, I was only getting about 8 miles per gallon before the gear vendor. Miles per gallon. I would only get 80 miles per tank. And after I put the gear vendor in it, I did a road test on it and I got 175 miles per tank out of it. So I doubled my gas mileage just by putting the gear vendor in it. And now that I got the Summit in it, it wants a little bit more jetting, so I got a little less, but I missed it by 3 exits. It wasn't really that bad. So where I went with the 600 Holly, I couldn't make it 3 exits, but it all depends on how much you got your foot in it as well. But definitely worth the money, and anybody could do it themselves. You just need the time to do it.